is way too early to decide who will win the 2024 NCAA Wrestling Championship. And if last year's event showed us anything, it's that anything can happen. From Spencer Lee losing to Yanni D getting a close match, but they're out and new guys are in. I'll go through every weight to let you know who's returning, who's not back, but most importantly, who's winning a title. And to mix things up, I'm going to make a bold prediction about somebody switching weights and somebody transferring schools. And I promise there's one surprise you probably haven't realized yet. So let's stop stalling and get to 125 pounds, where tough All-Americans like Brandon Courtney and Pat McKee are gone. And of course, the 2023 national champion Pat Glory of Princeton is out. But most importantly, three-time national champion of Iowa, Spencer Lee, is gone for good. So that is a tough guy to have out now. And you may think I go with the guy who beat Spencer Lee, that is Matt Ramos of Purdue, but I'm not going to do that. I'm choosing Eddie Ventresca of Virginia Tech, who went 22-9 last season. He placed 7th at Nationals as a freshman and took out some tough All-Americans along the way. That is Eric Barnett, Pat McKee, and Killian Cardinal. That's not to mention the other All-Americans he took to some tight matches. With 2 years under his belt, a brutal ACC season, and the top guys out of 125, he's set up for success. And at 133, the most notable guy who is not returning is Penn State's Roman Bravo Young, the 2-time NCAA champion, 3-time national finalist. But 2023 national champion of Cornell, Vito Rujao, is back. Or is he? Because the one thing you may not have realized yet is that 2024 is an Olympic year, meaning a lot of these guys, especially those who love folk style wrestling, could take an Olympic red shirt to try to make Team USA. And I honestly think that Vito, who is skilled at freestyle, does not return for the season. But that leaves up one other thing in the air, that is Dayton Fix of Oklahoma State. Will he return? Because Fix has taken an Olympic red shirt in the past, and yes, you're allowed to take multiple. Stefan Micic of Michigan had done so as well, but I think there's a couple other factors that have to be going on inside his head. That is that with Roman Bravo Young gone and Vito possibly not competing, could he decide that this is actually his year to finally win the title? You gotta remember, he couldn't beat RBY, and Vito Rujao absolutely decimated last year's competition. And as a 4-time All-American, 3-time finalist, I really think he is going to return for the 2024 year. He's accustomed to training freestyle and folk style in tandem. You saw him wrestle them both in the same night at a Bout at the Ballpark event just a couple years ago. If anybody can do it, I think he can, which is why I'm choosing him to win the 133 pounds title. Now, if you want to be like Dayton Fix, roll, jump, and blast double that subscribe button. Seriously, it really helps grow this channel as we try to pass 40,000 subscribers. Thanks in advance. And for that, I'm going to show you this sick wrestling clip. And at 141, there's a ton of talent returning. In fact, the only guy who's not back is Parker Phileas of Purdue. Andrew Alvarez of Northern Colorado will be the guy to beat. He was undefeated last year, winning the national title. But I'll tell you what, good luck winning this weight twice. And I think there are a few guys in contention here. The first is Cole Matthews of Pitt. Yes, he had a disappointing 2023 tournament, but he's a former national semifinalist and has been ranked number 1 at points in the past. Then, of course, you have two guys who place 2nd and 3rd respectively. That's Real Woods of Iowa and Bo Bartlett of Penn State, both in dominant powerhouse programs. As a Penn State fan, I'm rooting for Bo Bartlett, but he has head-to-head losses against Alvarez and Real Woods. In its Woods' senior season, he finished as runner-up last year, and I'm sure he's going to use that as motivation in the upcoming year. So, of course, no disrespect to Alvarez, who already beat Woods, but I'm going Woods to flip-flop that match and win a national title in 2024. He's dominated so far throughout his career, and I think he's going to continue to grind with the Iowa Hawkeyes. But one Hawkeye who's not returning is Max Murin at 149 pounds. He All-American last year and has graduated. The other top guy at that weight who's gone is Yanni Diakmahalis of Cornell. He won his 4th title, and now he's out. So that leaves the weight class pretty open. Of course, Sammy Sasso is the next guy up. Multiple-time national finalist, but he hasn't got the job done yet. Which is why I'm going with another guy who had a dominant performance at the Nationals last year. And cue the bias, because I'm choosing Shane Van Ness of Penn State. Now, let me keep things in reality, because he took out a tough Graham Rooks and Pinheiro Johnson in early rounds. Then he battled, yes he did actually battle Yanni Diakmahalis in the semifinals. So much so that Yanni shoved him off him at the end of the match and kind of gave him props in this post-match interview. He finished 3rd as a freshman, and he's a Penn Stater, so I only see him improving. Now, going from high school to dominant college wrestler is no easy task. And if you're a wrestler or parent of a wrestler, you may even be wondering how these guys get into college in the first place. Well, thanks to our sponsor, The Wrestling Consultant, you can start that process yourself. Whatever questions you have about the recruiting process, looking at scholarships, how to contact coaches, which division is even right for you, The Wrestling Consultant can help you by getting those questions answered in an easy way. Former D1 head coach and national champion Teague Moore has helped many wrestlers navigate this process. Whether you're going from high school to college or transferring from one school to another, he's somebody who can help you throughout those steps. You can get started with a free consultation today by going to thewrestlingconsultant.com. Thanks to The Wrestling Consultant for sponsoring this video. 157 is similar to 149 in that the national champion is not returning. Austin O'Connor of North Carolina is a two-time champ who has graduated. Another top guy at the weight is Josh Humphreys of Lehigh, who went undefeated throughout the regular season, ended up making the stand, but he's also not back. So with those guys not returning, you may think that I lean into my bias again and choose the national finalist, Levi Haynes of Penn State. After all, as a true freshman, he won 20 plus straight matches, won a Big Ten title, and made the national finals, where he eventually lost to Austin O'Connor. And with his performance, it's tough to say that anybody can beat him, but there's one guy I think could. This is where I'm making a bold prediction in that somebody from 149 will bump up to 157. Who will it be? Well, it's a guy who did not wrestle last year, and maybe you forgot about him. That's Ridge Lovett of Nebraska. As of the recording of this video, there's no confirmation that that's actually going to happen, but it was kind of alluded to that could change in the 2022 postseason. So I'm sticking firm, and don't forget that he did wrestle in the national finals in 2022, losing just to Yanni D. But a few months prior, he wrestled him in a tough match, and I think in the offseason, being able to train with some of these tough guys, with Peyton Robb, with the other Nebraska Cornhuskers, training up, getting bigger, getting bolder, I think we could see him actually win a national title at 157. And boy, oh boy, that leads us to 165 pounds, where just about everybody and their mother's returning. David Carr, Shane Griffith, Dean Hamidi, Julian Ramirez, Cam Amin, and national champion Keegan O'Toole. The only guy who's not really returning here is Quincy Monday. And just about any one of those guys could win, but there were two guys who were dominant in 2023 that I think will continue to stay dominant in 2024. That is the Big 12's David Carr and Keegan O'Toole. In the regular season, David Carr put a pretty good beating on Keegan O'Toole in the dual meet. Then at the Big 12 championships, he pinned O'Toole in overtime. Eventually, O'Toole flipped that match to defeat David Carr with a pretty convincing win in the final. But as these two wrestle and grow their rivalry, I think we'll see a couple more flip-flops. So who's going to ultimately win? This time, I'm actually going to choose David Carr, but with a twist, because there's one guy I said would bump weights, that is Ridge Lovett at 157, but there's another guy I said would transfer schools. That's David Carr. Now, from my understanding, he's graduating Iowa State after the 2023 semester, and that means he could be going to graduate school. But where does he go? I think he follows his friends and goes to a school not only where he can grow in his college career, but also drastically in freestyle. And if him losing in the national finals, but then coming back out 2 matches later to support his friends Aaron Brooks gives us any indication, I think David Carr could end up at Penn State. There's a good chance I could be proven wrong here, but I want to hear from you. Do you think this actually happens or not? Either way, let's move to 174, where a couple tough All-Americans are not returning. That's Mikey Labriola of Nebraska and Ethan Smith of Ohio State. Now, you may think this is a hands-down easy decision. Of course, it's going to be Carter Starachi of Penn State, who dominated throughout the season and earned a pin in the national finals. But if his post-match interview showed us anything, it's that he may have his eyes set on bigger goals in 2024 than just a college NCAA title. I think he takes an Olympic red shirt. And so who's next up? Well, I think Virginia Tech's Mekhi Lewis has a strong potential hold on the title. Granted, he lost in the NCAA finals and the placing rounds, but you got to take both of those with a grain of salt. They were in the tiebreakers, and the consies, literally anything could happen. Mekhi's a 2-time finalist, 1-time champion, similar to Dayton Fix. I think he could be eyeing up his last season with some of these guys gone, going on to train for the Olympics. I think that he actually comes back and wrestles to win that second title. Now, 184 is very similar to 141 in that there's only one placer not returning. That's Iowa State's Marcus Coleman. The difference between those two weights is there is one dominant wrestler at 184. That's Aaron Brooks. I mean, he absolutely dominated against guys like Trent Hidley, Parker Kekheisen, and Caleb Romero, and all of those guys are returning. And Aaron Brooks' bonus rate has gone up year after year after year. And I know I've said it before, but I have him in the likes of David Taylor and Ed Ruth and Bo Nickel as like one of Penn State's all-time greats. And not only could he go down as a Nittany Lion great, but an all-time great in the sport if he wins his 4th NCAA title next year. Could he take an Olympic red shirt? Yes, but I don't know if it's going to happen. But 197 is actually losing a ton of talent, including Max Dean of Penn State, Jacob Warner of Iowa, Ethan Laird of Rider, and the national champion Nino Bonacorsi of Pitt. But the one guy who is returning is the finalist Tanner Sloan of South Dakota State. He's returning for his senior year. And if his great run at nationals showed us anything, it's that he can definitely win a title, but he's not who I'm going to go with. I'm actually going to go with a Big 12 guy from Mizzou. That's Rocky Elam. He was my choice last year, way too early choice. He's going to be my way too early choice this year again. And if Sloan is that top guy, you got to look at their history. Yes, Elam lost to him at nationals, but he beat him at Big 12s. They've had a lot of back and forth history. And Elam had only 2 losses last season. That was to Sloan, the national finalist, and to Luke Serber in Adumi. And then if you look at how he's placed at nationals, he could potentially pull a Jaden Ironman. He's placed 5th, 4th, 3rd. Could next year be 2nd, or could he leapfrog that in place 1st? And I don't want to discount 2 other guys. That's Silas Albrecht of Nebraska, a young guy who had a fantastic year, and Bernie Truow, who wrestled for Cal Poly in the past, but is transferring schools. So before I get to my team champ, we got to look at 285 pounds. And the biggest loss, no pun intended, for heavyweight is Mason Paris of Michigan, the Hodge Trophy winner and the national champion in 2023. He dominated the competition in an unbelievable way, but just about everybody else is returning. Anthony Cassiope, Greg Kirkfleet, Colton Schultz, Wyatt Hendrickson, Lucas Davison. I mean, it is just a packed weight. Now, I'm sorry, Hawkeyes fans, but I'm not going to choose Anthony Cassiope just because he hasn't been able to find a way to get over some of that top talent. And at nationals, he was tacked by Mason Paris and then pinned by Wyatt Hendrickson in the placing round. And I'm not counting out Hendrickson because he had a phenomenal year, and I think there's a good chance he could make the finals. But one guy who beat him last year at nationals is Greg Kirkfleet. Granted, it was a tough match, but Kirkfleet also has wins over some of these other top talents, and his only losses last year were to Mason Paris. So the heavyweight pecking order will continue with Anthony Cassar winning a few years ago, then Gable Stevenson taking over, Mason Paris winning last year, and Kirkfleet finally winning next year. And as far as the team race is concerned, you have a few teams in competition, the usual suspects, but I don't think anybody's going to be able to compete with Penn State again. Yes, they're losing some talent, but other guys are stepping up, and I think we'll see some more finalists for them that nobody else is going to be able to compete against. But speaking of some of the other top heavyweights, who do you think would win in a match? Kurt Angle or Gable Stevenson? I have a full breakdown here listing out exactly who would win that match. Trust me, it is a fun one, and I recommend watching that video next.